gentlemen, welcome to Release the Creative. I am Kirk Westwood.
And I am Jeff Carpenter.
And this is your favorite podcast about creativity, cognition, and releasing that part of you that you've been told to sit down, shut up, and color in the corner your whole life.
So, this is, we are two ostensibly creative guys, and we work with a lot of creative people, and we are here to talk about that.
And what's funny is, so Jeff and I have known each other for 26 years. That can't be right.
That is, let's move on.
Holy crap, that's right. And whereas we're both very creative, no one would ever say that wasn't true. We're not creative in the same ways at all. We approach problems very differently. And I think that creativity gets a bad rap. Creativity gets this, it has, people try to define it as something, and I think they're defining it wrong. So that brings us to what we're talking about.
Yeah, so this podcast is here to explore the concepts of creativity. Kirk said we're very different. He is a wild spirit. He is an untamed horse, and I'm here to put the brakes on him sometimes. But I'm not the killjoy. I'm more of the engineer. I steer him in a useful direction. Kirk is the guy out in the desert, exploding uranium bombs, and I'm the one saying, well, how can we actually make this useful?
And that joke was going to get away from me so fast, I'm going to let it go. But exploding uranium bombs in the desert, it certainly had its downsides, but it was not without its merits as well. No, I hate systems. I hate systems with all that I am. I think that systems impede on people's ability to be themselves and work. And I have friends, of which you are one, but by no means the worst, of where without a system, there's just it's like a train without tracks. It just sits there, and neither of us is wrong. It's neither of those is a correct approach or incorrect approach, but creativity, I think specifically, we have these engineers. When I first started talking about creativity about a year or two ago, like as this goal of mine, I had people like, well, I work in insert industry. I am not allowed to be creative. I'm like, oh, that's such horseshit. Like, wow, that's such garbage. Like, no, they'd be really upset if I got creative. And I'm like, quit your job, not your industry. That job.
Well, this brings me to my first question for the both of us, I guess. Who should be listening to this right now? Who are these people?
Oh, that's a really good question. So from my perspective, first off, anyone who finds us interesting, hi mom, 3 people, but no, it's entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, middle level management people that feel they have a mission, whether it's that a promotion or whether it's that next rung in whatever ladder, or whether it's they're happy with their 9 to 5, but they're a blues singer at night, or whatever. That person that has a thing that is itching at them that they just can't figure out how to tackle. That is what we want to talk about.
That's great. I always have thought of myself more as a craftsman than an artist in my life, which is... it's one of those things that I can't be an artist. I wasn't trained. But there are so many things people do in everyday life, whether it is, you don't have to be painting, vistas. It can be just whatever you do at work. You could put a creative spin on it. You've been at, we both have had, cubicle jobs before.
Yes.
And you show up at the, briefing meeting, whatever, on Tuesday morning, and everybody gives a little slideshow. And there's always the one person that it just looks a little better. And, it wasn't that it was more effort. It was just that they spent a little time caring about how that information was conveyed visually.
Sure, absolutely.
And that's the kind of thing that over the years I've learned is not restricted to any one industry.
Absolutely. One of the things that we'll talk way more about in episodes and times to come is that we have said for years and years, all the way back to the age old Mad Men IBM generations, it's dress for the job you want, don't dress for the job you have, dress for the job you want, starch your shirt a little bit more, clean up a little bit better. But in modern era, when I was growing up, a visible tattoo, my father just would mock nose rings and mock visible tattoos. He's like, oh my gosh, these young hippies, but nowadays, visible tattoos, there are CEOs with visible tattoos. There are Fortune 500 CEOs with visible tattoos. And there are people we have this whole kind of culture of ping pong rooms, not boardrooms. But the modern equivalent of that dress for the job you want is no longer literally dress for that job, because wearing slacks to work and a button down is no longer necessarily a cultural thing. But it's that give a damn. It's that be a little bit extra, show up a little bit more on a Zoom call, use a light, like present yourself in a way that is creative and interesting and shows that extra punch.
Yeah, exactly. So what are we going to talk about today, Kirk?
So today, today's episode is called Let's Get Crackin'. And we're going to break into a lot of it. First, I kind of want to open up with, as you'll see us talk, the name of the show is Release the Creative. And what does that mean? And where did that come from? As well as, again, let's get crackin' with the Kraken. And why the Kraken is not just my personal logo, but it is the logo of our show and kind of, and where Release the Creative came from. And that is that, I've noticed through studies over the last couple of years that as much as we tell people that we promote creativity, we don't. We don't. We say to a child, we say, hey, you can be anything you can be anything when you grow up. You could be an astronaut, a doctor, a lawyer. You could discover new planets. You could do whatever. And they're like, oh man, I really wish that I could be restore cars, or I really wish I could be. This actually happened to my daughter. She told her teacher she wanted to be a glass blower. And the teacher was like, well, that's not a job. She's like,
used to be.
It is now. There's an entire Netflix show about it. It's great. Yeah. I'm not saying it's a particularly lucrative career, but who cares? My daughter came in and had seen the Netflix show about glass blowers and wanted to be a glass blower. And her teacher was telling her about how she could be anything in the world. And she said, I am going to be the world's best glass blower. And her teacher was like, no. Like, pick a real thing.
Anything but that.
And I heard about this and was like, I can't. Are you kidding? So we say, our education system, we really encourage our children to be creative within the 3% margin we allow, which is why I hate systems. They drive me up the wall. So Release the Creative is a take on, of course, the Release the Kraken from Zeus, from Clash of the Titans. The Kraken itself goes back to, I used to know the year. It's a Norse myth. The king of Norway warned his sailors that just off the coasts there was an octopus that could swallow ships, like whole ships. And it was a complete myth. That for years this was a myth. There was lots of art. It has been carried through many generations. Jules Verne talked about it. H.G. Wells talked about it. There's lots of things that these giant squids, these giant octopus, and they are completely mythological. Except we started finding them. In 2007, we found a mega squid. In 2012, we found an even bigger mega squid that I think they called something else. I don't have my notes in front of me at the moment. And then if you take that were, instead of 8, 10, 12 feet long, they were 30, 40, 50 feet long. And they have found sucker pieces inside whales that, if the proportions are correct, like if the ratio stands to be true, right. This squid would have been hundreds of feet long. My whole point in that, it's not a complete non sequitur, but the whole concept is that there is this beast that is down in the oceans that was there. And, maybe the king of Norway was full of it, or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he really did know. But for thousands of years, we've talked about this thing that was mythological. And now we're finding kind of proof. Again, I understand that there aren't squid that can eat eat whole boats and eat whole islands. But the ocean is this massive foreign abyss that we know so very little about. And people tend to act as though they are experts because of the things they do know. And very few people stand as an authority of the things they don't. And so today, so this show is called Let's Get Crackin', because creativity and cognition is an ocean. You are an ocean. Everyone has this foreign abyss inside them. And I think that we should release the creative. We should release the Kraken from within you, this mythological force that has the ability to envelop islands, because fact of the matter is that every person has that mythological force in them that can swallow islands, but they've been told, like my daughter on glass blowing, no, within this margin, or no, that's mythological. That doesn't really exist. And and they're all full of horseshit. They don't know what they're talking about. We've been trained so much to live within the margins that we understand. There are scientists out there that stick to so much of what they do know, which is great. And they disregard the oceans of knowledge that they actively don't know. So today, and for all of this podcast, we're really talking about that. It's what don't we know, and how can we release that creative, and how can we embody that kraken that lives within us to envelop and destroy mountains and islands, and I mean, in a creative, non-destructive sense. That was a long answer.
But yeah. Well, no, that illuminates things. The one part I got out of that was it's very easy to fall into the trap of we are photographers and visual communicators. We make videos, we do video editing, we do all kinds of visual medium stuff here. And when people talk about creativity, they might think that that's what we're talking about. And that can be a part of it.
Absolutely.
But the other thing we are is entrepreneurs. We are sitting in a studio in our business right now. And I would say that everything you've just said speaks more to that part of our lives than the video.
Oh, absolutely.
Part. People think creativity means drawing something, but to come in here every day and run our business, there's more creativity put into that every single day than any video I edit.
Well, I mean, I lived in LA. I was a photographer by trade. Like, I go months without touching a camera. I go months without getting into an editing suite, or months without actually touching a visual media project. But I don't go an hour without doing something that I would deem like a little creative, a little outside the box. And if I do go a day without going a little crazy, it's a bad day. Like, creativity and entrepreneurship, and because I think it's a good point. People will think, oh, well, it's a show about creativity, like being artistic. No, being artistic and being creative are massively distinct. They have overlapped, but they're not the same thing. But you touched on something really interesting there about, you said it kind of earlier, craftsman versus artisan, with craftsman versus the difference between someone who can take a beautiful picture by following the rules of the picture. Like, oh, you need 3-point lighting. You need this light, this light, this light. You need this, here are the apertures. Here's the technical data that makes a good picture algorithmically. But I want to talk a little bit more about the heuristics. We'll talk at one point about the difference between algorithms and heuristics, but that's not today. It's a fun conversation, by the way. But you specifically, actually, you are very systems based, where I'm very not, but you still approach problems very algorithmically and come up with really creative solutions while still being algorithmic, which is kind of a contradiction, but I talk about that.
Yes, there have been several times where Kirk has gone off on a tangent because I've asked a question because I don't understand what he's talking about, and it turns into a week's worth of work for him.
For me, yeah.
To figure out how to explain it to me, but it's never just for me. Once he figures out how to do that, it's useful in so many other ways.
No, it's. I was just saying to Jeff the other day, like, every really cool thing that I'm the most proud of was answering a question for him. Like, I was like, guess what? We're going to do X, and here's how. And he's like, you're going to have to translate that. And I was like, what do you mean? It's totally simple. He's like, no one speaks that. That's garbage. And so I will spend, tens of hours or dozens or more translating it into human. But no, I mean more specifically on the visual media side. You have a really interesting way, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot per se, but where we will approach a problem, you're like, we're doing a photo shoot, or we're doing, a couple of years ago, we did a big fire shoot where it was approaching the rules, but finding ways to adapt and come around the rules to make it a more interesting product. Still following the algorithm, still following here are the rules, here's this, and this. I hate rules. I'm like, why are we doing that at all? Like, let's just light the models on fire. It'll be way more effective. They were less pleased with that particular concept of mine. But I'm trying to find like the spark of where does creativity lie while following the rules? Where does that spark of, you can still be systems based, you can still follow this system of, no, you need a key light, you need a fill light, and you need a backlight, but you can still be creative. Where does, on a strictly visual, if we were using this straight analogously,
Right.
Makes sense?
Yeah. No, this is what we're going to get into over the next several weeks. Should we talk about this?
Sure.
So, some people are watching this. We do this video and audio, so some of you are listening in your car, but for those who can see, I'm holding Kirk Westwood's book. It's called The Very Best Bad Idea. He wrote this thing, and I wanted to talk to him about it. So tell me, what is The Very Best Bad Idea? Why did you write a book called that?
My daughters keep asking me that too. They're like, so what is The Very Best Bad Idea? I'm like, it's a book I wrote. And they're like, right, but what is like, I was like, I'm not gonna spoil the end. She's like, no, but what's the idea? So The Very Best Bad Idea is kind of back to that thing of my daughter wanted to be a glassblower. She's 13. And I'm not to dismiss her wanting of being a glassblower, but she's like, I want to be a glassblower, and she's 13, and she also wants to be a mad scientist and a rock star, and I'm super proud of all three of those. She's one lab accident away from being a supervillain, but frankly, I'll be pleased with that. The long and short of it is this: good ideas are forgettable. Everyone has good ideas every day. A good idea is to follow the rules. A good idea is to expand on the rules. A good idea is to every single person who has ever been employee of the month, employee of the year did so by working really well within the system. But you can't name most of those people unless they're like related to you. The people you can name are the people who said, nope, I'm going to do this instead. And everyone told him it wasn't going to work. Steve Jobs got tons of pushback. Bill Gates, to use the two most obvious cliches. But, Mark Randolph, who founded Netflix, he just wrote a book called, That'll Never Work. Because as he was pushing to do Netflix, an industry-changing, paradigm-altering, world-changing now industry, or a service that changed industries, he was told it was a terrible idea. He was told it would never work. The book, The Very Best Bad Idea, is about how every good idea you've ever had, you were told was bad, and every idea you told was good wasn't actually good. It just meant that it fit within the system in a way that other people liked. Good ideas are forgettable, and bad ideas are awesome.
So you ran through some of the examples that you hear everybody talk about. Oh, Steve Jobs and Tesla was a genius and all that stuff. And you hear this again and again. And some of this is real survivorship bias, where you look back at the 20th century and these are the guys that made it. And there are, of course, tons of people that didn't. So it's real easy to say, oh, well, that guy succeeded. Let's be like him. So tell me a little bit about, I guess, kind of the idea here. What you're getting at is what differentiates them. Like, how does this apply to us going forward instead of just looking backwards? Absolutely.
Well, and we'll certainly dive into that. But it's the two things that I noticed while writing the book, and tens, thousands upon thousands of hours went into that writing that book, the research and the physical typing. But that everyone is someone because they didn't listen to other people. And more interestingly, that everyone 99% of the time didn't do the thing you think they did, like almost at all. Edison did nothing you think he did. He did not invent the light bulb at all. Alexander Graham Bell did not invent the telephone at all. The people that are famous for doing that thing, chances are they sort of were adjacent to that thing, but it goes into credit. And the thing is that we are a very credit-based people. We want to give credit. We want to understand credit. So as such, we dig into those things. We're like, oh, Edison, he was a genius. What did he do? Well, he invented the light bulb. We have to assign something that we can grasp. But what's actually brilliant about Edison, other than he was just a total jerk, and Henry Ford, total jerk, and Tesla, weird dude, and everyone back to Isaac Newton, Francis Bacon, all of them, every single person that I dug deep and researched, they didn't do the thing you think they did. But what they did do was actually so much cooler, but it's so much harder to define. And that is that they changed the way that they thought about a problem. They weren't inventors. Francis Bacon didn't invent anything. He invented the scientific method, which was, we don't know what we're talking about. That's the method. The scientific method is, let's throw out everything we know, and unless we can objectively see it, he invented empirical data, which is to say, he defined, if you can't see it, forget it. And that's impressive. That's an impressive thing. So The Very Best Bad Idea, and moving forward, and not looking back, but moving forward, to your point, isn't about we're going to build a better mousetrap. It isn't about we're going to invent a new thing that is going to, like Netflix, I'm going to be Mark Randolph. What Mark Randolph did, Mark Randolph invented nothing. He didn't. Mark Randolph, Netflix, didn't invent anything. They said, what if we mail the DVDs? That's a different way of thinking about a problem. And just the act of thinking differently about the solution changed the mythology. Before that, that'll never work. Everyone was so excited to build the barriers. And so, if you say, what did Netflix, Mark Randolph, what did he do? Oh, well, he invented Netflix. He's the co-founder and first CEO. What did he invent? Nothing. He had programmers build a website. He had I guess, invented a system, but not really. What his real contribution was, he was willing to think about a problem differently. Aristotle, Socrates, Isaac Newton, everyone you can name that did anything worthwhile, they didn't invent anything. Edison, who I truly don't like as a human being, he didn't invent any of the things you think he did. What he actually did was approach problems differently and ask people to join him in that. And from that, inventions came. That's the basis of the very best bad idea. Again, super long answer, but it's the concept here is the only real progress is being willing to being willing to not think you know anything, even about the stuff that you're pretty sure you know about. By throwing away your own institutional knowledge and being really willing to look at the problems completely new every day. It's a total waste of time a lot of the time. I get that. But that's the point.
So over the next few weeks, the concepts in this book are a lot of things we're going to be talking about.
Sure. Only because I know them.
We're not reading it verbatim, but
sure.
this is what Kirk put in this book is what he knows, and so we're going to be using that to talk to some people. In fact, some of the people that you interviewed in this book will be guests on our podcast. So going forward, you could kind of think of this as the novelization, and we're the movie adaptation.
Wow, I hate that. Yeah, that's good. No, I mean, the whole book's about loving bad ideas. So, I mean, that's a doozy. But no, that's true. I like that. It's a movie adaptation.
So my question to you is, somebody who is listening right now that says, oh, you know what, I'm going to keep listening to this. Should they also read the book?
Absolutely. I mean, because... So I have a dear friend, and I hope he was really listening to this. He's a mentor and a friend. His name is Rennell Richards, and he is an amazing entrepreneur, and he's an amazing business coach, and he's a friend and a mentor. And he and I were talking while I was writing the book months back. And he was like, yeah, everyone's writing a book. I wanted to do a podcast. And his podcast called Business and Bourbon, and his other one's called Day Drinking, and both of them are fantastic. But he was like, yeah, I wanted to do a podcast. And he and I talked about the merits of each. And I could do an entire podcast about the merits of books versus podcasts. I really could. But to break it down is this. You can have a lot of cool, you can learn a lot in cool conversations. You can go and listen to a lecture and learn a lot, and you can listen to a podcast and learn some really insightful things. But nothing, in my opinion, really replaces the organizational structure and footnoted concept of a book. Like, yes, you can have an absolute podcast that sets you up as this brilliant, listen to him, he's this great speaker. Right, but there's a lot of people that when you fact check them, they're kind of full of it. This book, there's a footnote on every line. Like the book, I hope the podcast is entertaining. I hope people enjoy the conversations, and I'm sure I'll say some things that are shooting from the hip or not fact checked, and they're just kind of like what I think about things. And what I think about things is fine, and what you think about things is fine, and what everyone thinks about things. But the book is interesting because I who hate systems. Every time I made a statement, my editor would go, prove it.
That's what editors are for.
And I'm like, but it's true. And he goes, okay, then prove it. And so the book still has unbelievable value. The show, you'll get, the podcast, you're going to get a lot of the the TLDR chewed up, kind of like the breakdowns. But the book will still be my annotated footnoted explanation that if you hate what I'm saying, I can tell you where I got it, and you can then point out the flaws, and I can love that, but it'll still have value.
Great. Well, it looks like we got about 5 minutes left. I know we were going to finish up talking about one last thing. Could you tell us what we have in store for the next 4.5 minutes, Kirk?
Well, no, it's kind of more of what we're just saying is that the show is your show. The concept is cognition, which I absolutely love, which is the process by which we gather information. Because there's a lot of ways when you start breaking down the human brain. You're like, oh, are we psychologist, neurologist, neuroscientist, neurobiologist, cognitive specialist, cognitive neuroscientist. I'll take like rocket science for 500, Alex. I understand those aren't rocket science, but like the brain is unbelievably nuanced, and cognition specifically is the thing that I love because it is the process by which we accept information. It's the process by which we take in new information. Inversely, it's how we process that. So, as I will go on to kind of explain and develop, cognition is creativity. Is if two people. My dad used to tell me this when I was a kid. It's a poem that or it's a piece of old world prose, and I'm going to butcher it, but I'll paraphrase. It was like 3 umpires sit arguing, and one says, "Sums are balls and sums are strikes, and I calls them as I sees them." And the second one says, "Sums are balls and sums are strikes, but I calls them as they are." And the umpire says, "Sums are ball." The third says, "Sums are balls and sums are strikes, but baby, till I call them, they ain't nothing."
Beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Well, even one step more, all 3 of them are right. All 3 of them have the exact same job. They stand and they watch a ball and they determine, was it too high? Was it too low? Was it low? They make the judgment. And one of them says, look, I can only call it like I see it. I am bound by my understanding. And the other one says, screw that. I am right. I decide. I don't decide anything. I broadcast what I know. And the third one says, I bring into existence the reality, because, I mean, you can challenge jump, I suppose, but like, and all 3 of them have the same job, but cognitively they don't. One of them reports what he sees. One of them expresses the facts of the case, and the other one brings into reality that which is true. And that is 3 unbelievably different perspectives on the same exact act. And that can be done. And that's the show. The show is, we're going to talk about Henry Ford, and we're going to talk about Edison and Tesla, but this isn't a history lesson. We're going to talk about Steve Jobs and all these, but we're also going to talk about entrepreneurs right now that I'm dealing with in Milwaukee that I think are amazing and brilliant. We're going to talk about how just today on LinkedIn, I was talking to people about the stupid statement, time is money. No, it's not. Time is time. Money is money. That's why they're called that. If time is money, screwdrivers are also money. Time is a tool that you can make money with. So are screwdrivers. The long and short of it is this show is going to be about unpacking assumptions. It's going to be about looking about the same thing that you've done every day of your life and looking at it with new eyes, like that umpire. Sums are balls and sums are strikes. I call them as I see them. Sums are balls and sums are strikes. I call them as they are. Sums are balls and sums are strikes. And until I call them, they ain't nothing. It's the same act, sifted through 3 different perspectives for 3 entirely different nuggets of wisdom. And that is what you can expect from Release the Creative. Great. Well, we are going to be back next week. If you want to reach us, we are Jeff and Kirk. So we have a shared email address here. We're like an old married couple. Yep, it's true. You can write to us at jk@releasethecreative.com. And creative with a K. Creative with a K, just like the Kraken. So drop us a line if you have any thoughts. But mostly, I would just say come back next week and let's see where this goes. Awesome. Talk to you later, guys.